Okay, guys, this is Clint Locklear again. We're going to get a little deeper into this little series, if we want to call it that, is survival trapping and snaring, mostly mental masturbation. And I say here, here, because it is. Now, what I'm getting to go over is going to be extremely painful for some people that want to believe in the primitive is a way that you can go out and just feed yourself. And I apologize for the pain you're probably getting ready to incur. And I'm sure there's going to be some mental torment over this because we're going to use math, which is something that is not emotional. But I want to just go over a few things with this, just to have your brain going. Now, like I said before, if you're doing it because it's just like a hobby and it's just kind of a cool thing to learn, rock on. If you're doing it because you think it's somewhere in your life you're actually going to have to feed yourself, and you're planning on doing it primitively, I feel sorry for you. But I do have a recommendation. If you're going to have all the cool tactical guns and $300 knives and all this other stuff out there with you, will you please put a GPS marker on one of them so when you starve to death, somebody can come get your gear so it doesn't have to just rust in the woods somewhere? Because that's basically what's going to happen, and it'd be a shame to waste all that gear. So why am I saying in another different way that primitive does not work? We're going to use some math. We're going to talk about how far you got to go to set traps, and we're going to talk about the time it takes to set traps. And when you see this, I think there should be a light bulb going off. We need to find a more efficient way. We need to find a more simpler way. And we have to have a different skill set than maybe we thought we needed. So the point of this is to get you to think. I'm not here to try to prove you or change your mind one way or the other. I just want you to think, guys. So that's what this is. So even if this causes, like I said, lots of mental torment, remember, I still love you, man, when all this is over. Okay. 300 traps. When you look at historical data from Indian families that actually ran them, so you're talking 300 traps to go do that. And when you listen to the so-called survival trapping and snaring experts, the number 225 comes up over and over again, which I'm sure is just because somebody else said it. And they realize if any of them's actually ever tried to use the stuff they teach, it's so inefficient you would need a bunch of them to try to really catch any amount of anything. So we're gonna break this down with 300 traps, 200 traps, and 100 traps. And the first thing is the distance. So if you're going to run 300 traps, let's say in a very heavily populated area with animals, you can get away with setting a trap every 100 yards, or about a football field length. That's not very far, right? Animals don't live in condos. They don't live in apartments. Some of them do have dens and stuff, but animals are not concentrated where you can just go put some bait out in the woods, which what a lot of people think, and all these animals are going to run in for miles around to get caught. That's not the way it works, I promise you. So 300 traps, 300 feet apart, just keep the math simple, about a football field distance. How many feet is that to set 300 of these traps? Well, it's 90,000 feet, 90,000 feet. You divide that by 5,280, that's 17 miles. That's one way. That's just to set the traps. You're not checking anything yet. You're not catching anything yet. That's just doing it. Now, if you're in a vehicle and you got fuel, a four-wheeler, a motorboat, or something like that, 17 miles isn't that big. But we're thinking primitive, right? So if you're going to do that, and you're going to have some traps that'll be closer, and some will be a lot farther away to stay in animal populations, that is 17 miles. Have you ever walked 17 miles? Have you ever done it when you're hungry? 17 miles, guys, is nothing to sneeze at. That's a long, long way. Now, to go back and start checking those traps off of just 300 feet apart, you're at 34 miles by the time you run that line for the first time. 34 miles. Even in a canoe, unless you got a lot of current, that is going to wear you out. Does that sound like any type of reasonable plan to you? It doesn't to me. Now, 200 traps is 60,000 feet. At the same distance, that's 11 miles, so it's 22 miles by the time you check it the first time. 100 traps is 30,000 feet, which is 5.6 miles. But everybody's saying you need 225 traps to sustain yourself out when you're doing this stuff primitively. So 100 won't work, and that's still almost 6 miles, almost 12 miles before you get to actually run the line through the first time. That plan sucks. I mean, that really, really sucks. Now, we're going to break this down to a different way. Now, this is going to seem like someone hits you with a right cross, then hits you with an uppercut, all really close together if you want to believe in the primitive 225 trap fantasy. So the pain's going to be a little real, but I promise you'll get over it, because once you understand this, you can make better decisions and come up with better solutions. And that's the goal here. So that's the reason I'm doing this. 300 traps, doing primitive. So you're going to be whittling wood, you're going to be making your toggles and your switches and your triggers, and you're going to be dragging weight around for your deadfalls. You're going to be doing all that. So let's say you're really good at this. You have a tremendous amount of resource at every single place you want to set a trap, and you can get it done with a 15-minute average, which I dare to say is being extremely generous if you ever really time yourself with these traps. Now, if you don't know how long it to make these traps, guys, go and put a stopwatch with it and see. It'll be kind of scary. And then you'll see what I'm going to tell you makes this so nonsensical on so many different levels. 300 traps at 15 minutes a piece average is 4,500 minutes. Divide that by 60 so we get hours and something we can understand. That is 75 hours to go set those traps at 15 minutes apiece. 75 hours, 3.1 days to go set 225 primitive snares, traps, deadfalls, whatever it is. Now, that's not counting the distance we just covered. That's saying that's you setting traps and you're magically being transported from one location to the other in less than a second. And while you're doing this, you're not allowed to go to the bathroom. You're not going to be able to get firewood, work on shelter, work on signaling, work on anything like that, because that time period is 100% trapping time only. So when you break that down and you're actually going to have to eat and build fire and do everything else you're probably going to have to do in that situation, that 3.1 days is probably going to be broke down in over about 6 days, because you're going to have stuff you've got to do. This is why the single man mentality does not work. So I hope you're starting to see that. So let's say we're going to do 200 traps at 15 minutes apiece. That's 3,000 minutes divided by 60. That's 50 hours of doing nothing but trapping and magically going from one place to the next and never having to spend any time walking, rowing, whatever, driving, anything. 50 hours, 100 traps, 1,500 minutes divided by 60 is 25 hours to do 100 primitive traps. Have you ever went out and made 100 primitive traps? See, that's where the idea of going out and doing it yourself, I get that. Makes a lot of sense. But when you look at what guys, and historically what people had to set so many of these for, with a single person to do it, it just doesn't work. The math doesn't work in any stretch of the imagination. And I dare say, if you go back and look at the first one we did, the calories are probably not going to work out on this either. Because when you put all this together, you're asking someone to be in like a not needing to eat and be able to do a Ironman over in Hawaii triathlon on a daily basis to try to pull that off. And that's probably not going to be you, and I'm sure it's not going to be me, because it just doesn't work that way. So I want to put this in a different context now to show you. When someone says modern trapping or modern snaring or modern trapping methods, and you think that somehow that's cheating, if Indians had steel snares, they would have used them, because as soon as Thompson came out with them, they did go to them. There's a reason they switched. When they could get away from muskets, they sure liked the lever action rifles a lot better. Going back just to do that, it's almost a form of, it's delusional is what it is. If you have the equipment, which you can plan for by having ahead of time, you're not having to make the traps, for goodness sake. You're not in a survival situation right now, so you can go order some snares or snare parts and build them yourself. Get you some body grips, some footholds, but probably a dozen or so dog proof like the FB1s. You can get all this from F&T, post.com. You can get it from okiecableandtrap.com, wildlife control supplies. .com. I mean, these are guys I order from. They'll treat you right, and I'm not selling any of this stuff. So, I mean, there's no reason for me to tell you this. But let's look at a modern trapper, someone that is, I'm going to use myself as an example very quickly at the beginning. I've done a lot of trapping. If you don't believe me, go back to the first one in this series and look at all the pictures. Guys, that's just a fraction of the pictures that I could have showed. I could have went on for hours. I've got, I think it's 22 or some videos. Most of them average probably 2.5 hours long, trapping everything. And a lot of people think I'm well known in trapping, but they think that like I'm the best. I'm not the best. I've met guys that I am nowhere near the capability of, and with the numbers they catch really makes me look bad if we're going to be competitive about it. But I'm going to use some of my numbers. For several years, I'm catching 5, 6, 7, 800 beaver out of one area. My best year in that area, which was one county, was 1,104 beaver. If we're going to be honest with that, you know, an average beaver here in Tennessee is going to be somewhere in the range of 35 to 45 pounds. I've caught them up to 60, 70. My heaviest one's 82, and I've caught them as little as 3 pounds. So it ranges, but we're going to say an average weight in there somewhere around probably 40 pounds, 35 pounds. You debone that beaver, you get 6 pounds of meat. They got a really big liver that's very healthy for you. So we're going to give that 1.5 pounds. Off one guy in 10 months doing this full time, it was 8,288 pounds of protein, meat. That's not counting the tail fat. That's not counting brains, bone broth, any of that stuff I could have used also. That's just pure meat in the liver. So that is, like I said, that's over 8,000 pounds of meat from one guy using what an average good hustling trapper with decent equipment can do. Now, 2 beaver a week will easily sustain somebody. Now, for me to go out and catch a couple of beaver a week, for the most part, I could do that probably in about 45 minutes a day. And probably only be 2 days to do that. But let's say that someone has not been doing this as long as I have, because that's the reality of most of y'all watching this, which is fine. Y'all doing other things while I'm doing this. Let's say you've got some snares, some footholds, or 5 or 6 330 body grips, good ones like Bilal's, and you're going to go out and do this. Someone that has very little experience but kind of understands what's going on with a beaver can meet those daily needs probably in a couple hours a day a week. So that's very different from having to go out and get to try to do the same calories with other animals in primitive methods, where you can see that's going to take you, you're going to have to walk 34 miles before you finish checking it the first time, and there's no physical way to get that done in a 24-hour period unless you're like really ramped up on cocaine, and you can do that forever. I mean, I just don't know how you can do it. Now, we're going to break it down to coon. My best on coon has been 300 coon in 14 days. There's guys that catch a lot more coon than me, which I'm going to give you an example of. But this was in Iowa. We're going to say 4 pounds of meat per coon. That's 1,200 pounds, 2 coon a week with all that fat. You'd be good to go if you understand a little bit about foraging. You have some supplies like rice or ramen noodles or something, so it's not all the same thing. It's 1,200 pounds. That's 150 days of 14 days of work to feed somebody. Now, the beaver is a year and a half off of 10 months. So even the investment there. But see, I would never go out and try to catch 1,100 beaver in a survival situation. You couldn't handle that many at one time, because some of those days you're 30 and 40 and 45 beaver. You're not going to be able to process that, because we're doing it for fur and deep freezers and all that stuff. You probably wouldn't have all that. So you wouldn't go out and try to catch 1,100 beaver. But I want you to think about, if the world does go sideways, who do you think has a very well skill set that a lot of people are going to be willing to have you part of whatever they're doing, for the simple fact as you can feed a lot of people with the skills and the equipment that you have? I'd say under a doctor at that point, the trapper that is actually competent, and I'm not talking about hunting, I'm talking about trapping, would probably one of the most valuable assets that a group could get. And that's just reality. because you can go do your thing while they go do their thing, and you're taking advantage of what they're doing and they're taking advantage of what you're doing. So just keep that in mind when we talk about these numbers I'm talking about right here. So the coon's 150 days off 2 weeks. There's a lot of guys, and I mean a lot, several hundred, if not 1,000 guys in Iowa every year take 1,000 coon in a month. That's kind of like the standard of being the real coon trapper out there. Now, 1,000 coons off of this is 4,000 pounds of boned up meat. Now that's full time, full belly, full gas tank, all that stuff. That's all they're doing is coon trapping, probably about somewhere 16, 18 hours a day to pull that off. Now, for an average person, not the superhero trapper, but the average guy that understands what raccoons are, where they go at certain times of the year, different things like that. You know, with some snares, some FB2 dog-proof traps, or some conibears, or some good Sleepy Creek long springs that'll last you a long time, style traps or bridgers. You're probably talking just that kind of guy, as long as he has more knowledge than, you know, just go set something along a waterway somewhere. But you actually start understanding coon. 2 coon a week will probably sustain you very well, especially with all that fat. And you can probably do that in most parts of the country on foot in an hour a day. Do you see the difference between this? Now, we're going to go into some more quick things, not to draw this out very far. You can, you know, and I'm not talking about just trying to survive off beaver or coon or anything like that. But having that ability is where the real survivability comes from. Now, you can interchange coon with groundhogs, marmots out west. You know, it's just where you're at. Everybody here that's watching this has got an unfair advantage about where you're from in some way, form, or fashion. It's easier for you to do some things than it is probably for me, and it's easier for me to do some things than it probably is for you. You've got to find that out. That's why whatever you come up with is your solution, not my solution. Turtles. Me and a buddy go out with 14 traps. We got a video on it. We catch 500 pounds of turtle a day. That's what we keep. That's not all the little cooters and you know, red ears and soft shells and all that. Those are legal sized snapping turtles that we catch. That is going to break down weight wise to about 1,000 pounds of meat. That's not right. 2 pounds per beaver, 500 pounds. So, you know, 2 pounds for turtle. I'd have to figure this up a little different because I don't know exactly how many turtles that was. But it's a crap pile of meat, guys, because you're going to get about 30% of the body weight off a turtle if you debone it out. So at 1,000 pounds of turtles, okay, we can do it that way. 1,000 pounds of turtles in 48 hours, which we did, and still did a lot of goofing off. With 14 traps, that would be 300 pounds of turtle meat in 48 hours. You see the difference there? I mean, it's that's why when I look at survival trapping, the way it's taught, trained, and you know, expanded on, that's the reason to me and a lot of other trappers, we look at that just slack-jawed. It doesn't even make any logical sense. And there's such a better way that with someone, if they're too cheap to spend, you know, a couple $100s on traps, and then you're going to be too cheap to get what you need anyway when you should be having supplies. So you're probably toast to begin with. A couple $100 investment in traps, even 500 if you wanted to go that far, that's a pittance for what it could do for you when you need it to happen. You know, one of my favorite things to trap is bobcats. I love bobcat meat. We cook it all the time. We do it for students. I've never found anybody that actually ate it that didn't love it. You know, that's not the easiest thing to catch for a beginner, but if you got them in your area, that's something you can probably pick up 2 or 3 a week, or at least 1 a week, or a couple a month, or something like that. But I'm intermixing beaver meat and deer meat and turtle meat and groundhog meat, so it's a varied. I get a lot more nutrient base off doing that. But just think about what I'm telling you. To go out in a couple of days and catch 300 pounds of turtle meat, or I'd only spend an hour or 2 doing beaver, or an hour or so doing coon to sustain myself, that frees up all that other time that most guys will never have the chance to use because they haven't planned ahead and understood enough about the animals or the right equipment to do this. So just let this roll around in your head a little bit. And those numbers we started with, I'm pretty sure is going to be shocking to a lot of y'all. Go back, check my math. Prove me wrong, please do. And down in the comment section below the video, knock yourself out. If you can come up with a way to prove me wrong, I want you to, because I want to have the best information, so I've got the best solution. So just put those thinking caps on, guys, and get out of fantasy world.